Hey, welcome guys. So today we are going to be building up Tamiya's brand new H39. Now, if you watch the review of this kit, I do have two of these. This is the French version from kind of early war / that period before World War II. I also have a second kit that I am going to build up right after this in the German captured version. So come time to paint and weather and everything, we'll be doing both kits side by side, which will be something I haven't done before. But I wanted to get one of them built up. I'm not going to do two building videos because there's really only maybe 6 different parts that are going to go into each of these. I also have built up very quickly one of the figures, which we will look at in detail as well, because the figure is really impressive. It is pretty much the quality of resin, but without having to work with resin. So you'll notice we're going to leave the tools off. I do have the tracks separated so I can take them off. They're kind of tight on there, so we'll see if we can take them off when it comes time to paint. But let's flip it over and let's see how we build up this kit. All right, so we will be starting with a non-bathtub style hull. This is pretty classic now, as classic as the bathtub style hull was on the kind of 1970s and 80s, even into the 90s and early 2000 Tamiya kits. This is kind of the new way of doing things, right? You have a kind of solid piece in the bottom, solid side plates, and then some sort of brace in the middle. And if you've watched my other builds, this is maybe my favorite moment of the build, is kind of these first 1 or 2 steps, building up the hull into its own version of a bathtub style. It just, everything clicks together absolutely flawlessly. It's really just a reminder that we're kind of in the golden age of model building. At least, it'll obviously get better from here, but it's really amazing what we can do with plastic molds now. So as I build that up, there's not too many pieces there. I will say I built this kit in under 24 hours. And what I mean by that is I returned home with this kit somewhere around 2 or 3 o'clock. I did the review, and by 9 a.m. the next morning I had the kit complete. So it's definitely like a weekend build. Nothing too crazy. And as you can see here, I showed where they're putting the sprue gates on this kit are just in the most perfect places. Not anywhere that's going to impact where you're going to have kind of that flat edge or kind of an indent taken out. Everything on this kit is just done so well, except I'll say one thing, and that's going to come pretty much at the end of this video. I would give this kit like a 98. It is so close to perfect. And I do stand by my statement that I made in my review, that this is one of the best all-around armor kits that I've seen and that I now have had the privilege of building. I'll be very excited to build up the German version as well. So once we have the lower hull situated, we're going to move on to kind of the drive sprockets, idlers, and the return rollers. Now, this kit does have return rollers that you have to put them on in a specific order, because the link and length tracks are going to fit into that. And if they're not lining up right, or you don't put the right return roller in the right spot, there's definitely corrections you could make, but come to put on the tracks, you'll see that it doesn't quite work. You do, as you can see me putting in here, you do get a couple poly caps for this kit. You're only going to use 2 for the wheels, and that's going to be for the front idlers here. So those will be able to move. All the other wheels have to be glued on and are static. That's okay. We really only need the return roller to spin so that we can get the tracks lined up perfectly, because the return or the rear idler is flat, and as are the wheels on this kit. So no grooves or anything that we have to fit them into. The return rollers definitely take a little bit of force to get put on. It's not a fit issue. It's just, it's more of how well they fit. They kind of need to be clicked into place, which is a little bit strange at first, but once you push and you hear that click, and you'll know that it's in the right spot. Then we have 6 total bogies to make. We're going to make 4 because the 2 that are going to go on the front are specific for each side. And that, you know, whether you're building the French version or the German version, that's going to be the same. So we're going to go by the directions here. We're going to build the first 4, and I will build one on camera here. I won't bore you with the build of all of them, but we have to make this small suspension element, thread it into, there's 2 little indicator marks where that's going to go. And we want to be really careful with our glue here. Even though we don't have to paint road wheels. These, I'm 99.9% sure, these are steel, so there's nothing that it's going to need to be painted, but just out of habit, I would like them to spin. That way we can spin them and make sure that they're fully painted when we come to that stage. So get those in there, be careful with your glue, and even if you do get a little bit of glue on the wheels, you can always just keep turning them, and that just keeps the glue from like fully setting and will allow you to, you know, spin them later. So that's what the bogies, again, they're going to be very, very similar, but this is what they're going to look like when they're done. And I'll go ahead and I'll get the other 3 built up. Once we have those built up, there are a couple small parts that we're going to get added on here. And basically some supports for the idlers or sprockets here. And again, those are going to be static. Once we get those in place, put one on for the other side. There's perfect indicator marks, so you can't mess these up. I did keep the pieces separate, but in typical Tamiya fashion, they've made everything side specific, and to the point where, again, you can't get it wrong. I would absolutely suggest dry fitting, but you'll notice in the dry fit that there's something wrong, and with Tamiya, that's a good indication that maybe take a second, look at the directions, and just reevaluate, you know, what you've done and what you're about to do. Once we get our bogies on there, there is just a little support that we need to put in place there that further attaches it to the main body. The connection points for the bogies here they're very, very small, although you'll feel when it's in place. Again, this is almost like a click-in kind of moment. But just make sure you give it a decent amount of drying time. Again, I did complete this kit in less than, a calendar day, but I definitely, probably between like 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. was building this, but I kept walking away from it. When I built these idler wheels here, they do come in 2 pieces, 3 if you're doing the German kit. The French kit is just 2 pieces. I did leave these to dry for a pretty good amount of time just before sanding them, and I didn't skip ahead anything like that. So it's a quick build, just to give you an idea. Absolutely could get it built and painted in a weekend. I don't know about weathering, but maybe like a 6-hour build time with, drying in between, things like that. Now we're putting on our last bogies, which again are side specific. There's not too much of a difference, and if you did put the wrong one on the wrong, you really wouldn't notice. It is a very, very, very slight difference. And then we will need to glue on those idler wheels. And once we have all our wheels on, we can start working on our Lincoln length tracks. And this is another thing that you have to build these to fully experience it. These are the best Lincoln Link tracks, which is funny because they're very small. They're not quite as small as like the French UE carrier and things like that, but they are tiny and they are the easiest Lincoln Link tracks that I have built from Tamiya, or Tamiya, so far at least. We'll say so far. The cutout on each of them is just perfect. You see, they don't want to fall apart. And if you've built Lincoln Length tracks, they kind of want to fall apart. You know, they do fit in well, but not to the point where the run on the left that I built was one, you know, they were all unglued. Now I'm gluing them one by one. Doesn't really matter how you want to do it. Usually you have to glue one by one. In this case, you could do it, you know, as you could build them all up and then glue them later. You can do it one by one. It doesn't matter. They fit into place that well. They're still not quite as good as the RC tracks on the Sherman that I had built, but those just snap together. They're fully workable. I get it. It's Sherman tracks. It's a little bit easier, I guess. But those are super detailed, and they were the nicest tracks I've built on any model kit. Anyways, we let that dry for, I let them dry for like a minute. I don't like them to dry for too long, but we want to make sure, at least in our case here, that we glue the tracks together. We bend them accordingly. I'm going to tape them in place with just some masking tape so that we get the shape, but we don't want any glue on the inside because we don't want them to get glued to the, you know, idler, sprockets, road wheels, any part of the tank here. I left them, we'll call them broken in the front, as in unglued, so that we can kind of, you know, take them off. Again, that front idler comes off, or sprocket. So it'll make hopefully getting them off a little bit easier. But I like to keep giving them a little move like this. Again, just make sure that they don't get glued to the wheels. I'm not going to lie, I have no idea how people glue the tracks on and then airbrush it. I guess their airbrush is just 1,000 times better than mine. Or I don't know. I've never even attempted it because it just doesn't seem all that feasible to me. I am a little bit old school in how I like to do things. Like I like to keep the tools off, as we're going to do here. I like to be able to take the tracks off and at least paint and start to weather them separate. But everyone does it a little bit different. Now we're going to start putting on the fenders here. So if you are doing the German version of the kit, there is one small hole for the antenna mount that you're going to want to make. If you're doing the French version, there's no hole that you need to make. In fact, the French version, it does have 2 holes that you need to make later on in the build. You could get away without it. So if you don't have a, you know, little drill bit, whatever, all of them are 1 millimeter, which is very nice. It's very standard, and you don't have to worry about swapping, you know, bigger and smaller sizes. Here are the 2 that you need to make in the sides of the upper hole. You could definitely get away without those. You'd obviously need to do some alterations on the parts, but it wouldn't be anything too crazy. And once we get a couple hatches and small parts put onto the upper hole here, you can see it fits like a glove, and we're going to glue that in place. There is absolutely no, you know, major seam or anything like that you need to really worry about here. There's absolutely no fit issue. The way that they molded this kit together, again, it's flawless. There would be some potential in the front of the kit where you saw it fit together for the pieces maybe not to line up right. I could see a situation where maybe you have to sand it a little bit. I did a second pass over with glue, and any sort of line that was there just disappeared. So very nice by Tamiya. Then we put on the fenders, and we're going to do this on the back as well as the front. And again, you're left with just the perfect, because there should be a seam there, but it should be very small, and you are left with just the perfect seam.
that looks like it came together and it was molded in one piece. So again, very, very impressive. Couple more small hatches and things and little tiny pieces that we need to put in here. But as you see, as I said on the review, I trusted in a brand new Tamiya kit. Whoops, don't drop your kit. I trusted them to do just a perfect job with the small pieces, and they did, as always. There's not many small pieces on this kit, but there are a couple, and luckily they just fit absolutely perfectly. And they're just easy to get on. I only had to look on the floor for one small piece, which on a small kit is really, really impressive. Because I am clumsy and I drop all of the small pieces and I fling everything with my pliers. Anyways, we're gonna attach the exhaust here, and we'll come back to this once it dries. As you can see, it's wide open on one side. There will be a shield, like a heat shield that covers that open space, but I wanted to leave that off because I want to be able to paint the exhaust a separate color. I'll do that with a brush when we get to that stage. But if I put that heat shield on, it's already going to be a little bit tough to paint on the kit as it is. But I wanted to at least get it on there for the build video. I might have left it off if I wasn't filming, but it just wouldn't have looked right without the tools and the exhaust. So I put it on, and we'll put the shield on basically once we get the exhaust painted up. And then we should be able to even weather it with that shield on there. Then we'll get the front of the tank closed up here. And we are nearing the end. You will notice there are a couple pieces that we're putting on here that if you're building this kit, it's basically just a difference of color that you would do between the German and the French kit. And it's really, really nice because things like the jack and some of these other tools, it tells you which one should be. I know Tamiya instructions always tell you that it should be like what, red, brown, and the metallic gray. But on things like the jack, we don't always know. Sometimes I paint it the color of the tank. Sometimes you paint it, a metal color. This one tells you to paint it the color of the tank. And there's actually a couple different things like that where you might think to paint it, I'm just comparing it to the TACOM instructions where it doesn't tell you the color of the tools and things, and it's kind of left up to your own devices. This tells you what to do, which I always like. You can not listen to it and paint it as you like, or if you just want nice, simple instructions, just another area where these instructions, as always, excel. Then we're going to assemble the trench tail. Now, this is a couple really, really thin pieces and just a flawless moment from Tamiya. As always, we will get to the thing that I didn't think was so flawless, and it is like the one thing from keeping this from being an absolutely perfect armor kit. I will build a second one. Maybe I'm trying to think if I did something wrong, but anyways, we'll get to that. The trench tail fits together absolutely perfectly. I built this up all at once. As you see, I had all the parts cut out. I did not wait for glue to dry. I just built it up as I don't know, over the course of 5 minutes, 4 minutes, with all the drying and everything, or sorry, all the gluing and everything. Nothing wobbles at all. It's perfect. It's perfectly engineered, and there is a ton of detail. They didn't sacrifice anything. I'm not overly familiar with trench tails, and I didn't major in it, but from the naked eye and everything like that, it just is perfect. It might be the most perfect part of this kit because looking at it, it seems like one of those things that it wants to not work, but it just works. Then we'll get a spare idler. Well, once we get the kind of support for it, we'll get a spare idler glued onto that. And then we have a couple of support pieces that we have to attach onto the tank. once this trench tail is put on there. A couple small kind of fragile pieces, but again, everything just fits really, really well. They also have a very nice diagram for these last couple parts. I will say, just keep dry fitting that little rounded piece on top that's sticking up right now. It's still a little bit confusing, even with the directions, how they pointed out, but keep dry fitting it, and all of a sudden you'll hear that not a snap like something broke, but it snaps into place. You know it's the right fit, and you can glue it. So now we'll get that trench tail glued on. So you can see not a lot of contact points, but not a lot are needed because it is just such a good fit. Then we'll have a little like plug that's going to ensure that spare wheel stays on. And we'll get these two supporting arms glued up and put on there. This is one of those cases where I like to put the extra thin down before. I do put a little bit on afterwards, but if you put it on before, just like that, you'll see it sticks, and even if you drop it, like I did there, it doesn't drop and fall to the floor or back on your bench. It stays connected. Obviously, it's a glue, but it just ensures that you don't drop, these small kind of. This is one of those annoying pieces. Not on this kit, but on any kit that you've ever built, this is one of those pieces that it should annoy you. Gladly, it doesn't on this kit. But having that little glue down first just make sure that you don't have an annoying time. Then we're going to start building up the gun or cannon. And we did skip the building of the chain. So there's just a couple small pieces that have to go on to the chain. If we're doing the French version, which we are, we're going to basically split the chain in two. And then I'm going to paint it up and whether it separately and put it on at the end. If you're doing the German version, it does not have the chain, so you can just leave that off. Again, there are options to, open up a hatch. If you're doing the German version of this tank and you do the German figure, the hatch does need to be open to show that figure. So we get a lot of good detail on the gun mantlet here. I'm gonna somewhat sloppily put this together just because on the French version, which I'm building now, again, I'm not gonna have anything open. So I'm only really worrying about the exterior, but it's just enough detail that with an open hatch, it won't look empty inside, which is really nice. So we'll get the top and bottom half of the turret glued in. And once we have that glued together, you have just enough room to slot the gun in. This is where it gets a little bit wonky. And I took a long time off camera kind of fiddling with this because it seemed like maybe I didn't do something right. I still can't fully figure it out. Maybe I'll figure it out by the time I do the second build. I hope I do. But when you glue this small piece in place here, the gun should be resting in a small circular kind of guard that keeps it in place. It's really easy to pop it out of that. And then even more so, we'll call it the shield that goes on the front here. These two pieces on the left and the right of the gun, they just don't want to sit perfectly. You really, really have to look at how they're sitting in the picture of the tank. As you see, they don't want to push in. They don't want to sit evenly. It's just a slightly odd moment, especially for how well this kit went together. That's pretty much the only moment. Again, if I was rating this tank, this kit, I would give it a 98. And the reason it didn't get 100 was honestly just because of that. The pieces didn't want to fit perfectly. They were just a little wonky. And for a kit that really builds itself, I know people say that, Tamiya kits, put them in a bag, shake it up, you get a model. This one is even more so than, when that saying probably came out, except for that one part. So take your time with that. Definitely look at the picture, at a reference photo, whatever, and just make sure that you get it right or that it's good enough. I went with the good enough approach because I'm going to build two, but that's generally the approach I go with anyways. Then we'll get a couple, extra pieces of armor, some tow hooks, and some hatches and things glued on to the top of the tank, to the turret here, and we'll get this closed up. As you can see, these hatches just fall into place. You could easily glue them from the inside. You still have some space. The trouble with gluing them from the outside, you want to make sure that you don't close the gap completely and fuse the plastic together. But as long as we can do it, with a light amount of glue and basically get it so a wash will still sit in there, that's good enough for what we're trying to do. And then we have, last but not least, the little bubble part of the turret, the cupola here. And this is the French version. On the German version, they upgraded that to be not so bubble-like. We'll get that put on, and that is the last piece, obviously minus the tools and the kind of heat shield for the exhaust. That is it. That's the complete build. I have built the figure, the French figure at least, off camera. I will show you it in a second here. I've primed it just because I think it brings out more detail, and the detail is really, really nice. It is 99% of what a resin figure looks like, in my opinion. I haven't built 100 resin figures. I built 3 or 4, but it looks really, really nice. And the way it goes together, there are, just like this kit, there are no seam lines that you need to worry about. There is barely any sanding that you need to worry about when you put the figure together. And any, gaps or anything between the arms or the torso, it all just disappears and works perfectly. I'm not going to end up painting the French figure. I probably, maybe will do the German one, just because I think it's a cool figure, something different. But I just wanted to show you guys that in case you are interested in the figure. It's an A+. So there you have it. If you've made it this far and you haven't already, as always, I would please ask you to like and subscribe to the channel. On the next video in this installment, I am kind of scrambling and pushing back some videos that I had ready to go for this week because I got this kit and I was really excited for this kit. So we will be doing our full half track, the Hannah Mag. I do have that full video on for next week, and then the week after we're going to be starting another one of the top 5 kits for my video earlier in this year. It was actually technically the end of last year, but early in this year, end of last year, same thing. And then I am off camera again going to get the German version of this kit built. In the painting and the weathering videos of the H39, we'll feature both, and we'll do both side by side. We're obviously not going to go super into depth on the full weathering and painting of each one, but I just want to show kind of how versatile this kit is, because again, it is amazing. We are getting 2 tanks in one. I know they're the same kit, they're the same tank with 7 or 8 differences, but I think when you see the German versus the French version with their different camouflages, it's going to look like 2 different kits. And again, I've never done anything like that, so I think it'll be something new and interesting for me. But that's what we got coming up. I also am 2 seconds away basically from finishing the Tiger, from weathering that, the Tacom Tiger, and then I just got to get that video put together. So let me know in the comments what you think. If this is a kit you just got, if you built it, let me know. Again, I think it's a 98. I think it's one of the best kits ever. I'm also partial and biased to light tanks, so could just be me speaking, but absolute pleasure to build. And I appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you on the next video.